Hey guys, welcome to another session of RBTL, or Reading Between the Lines. This is the October 28th dev note. Usually it would be called the patch or balance patch preview. I think that's the title. This one we're just gonna call it the Mediator Kawerik. I'm most likely gonna be titling the video that way. Since he is the highlight, he is not only the highlight, he is absolutely broken. I don't use the term broken lightly because I don't like that. It gives the sense that, you know, this hero is like a must-have, but in this case he definitely is. Of course I'll explain it. If you guys have watched my YouTube videos in general, my latest video was an initial thoughts on Ran, the new Ice 5-star thief hero. And while I was talking about his kit on paper being like very like loaded, everything you would really want, I used his video as a segue to talk about this underlying problem that I foresee, and a lot of you guys have foreseen it, so it's not like, you know, I'm a genius, I figured this out. I really appreciate the comments on that video. A lot of you guys actually left comments based on what I asked, which was specifically what do you guys think about the kind of like this unsustainable power creep. That's how I kind of like labeled it. And the example is basically like, you know, no longer can people just be a defense breaker like Ice Tywin anymore. You know, he does hit everyone, AoE, defense break 100%. But now you got Ran, who has strip into defense break with stigma debuff, although his defense break is not as high. But he has, like, you know, self-immunity buff, extra turn attack buff. And I used Apocalypse Ravi in that video as an example to show the tooltip or the skill description, how much it has bloated in just about a year and a half. We're talking about basically just two or one subsequent balance patch, and until now. Mediator Kawerik and the heroes alike in this balance patch will have the same thing. I'm not too surprised. This is the way that Smallgate decides to buff heroes. Now, for those who have these heroes, these buffs are all really good. Okay, so my comment on this, you know, unsustainable way of balancing heroes because they're not willing to nerf heroes. Balancing heroes, has nothing to do with the quality of the buffs. Like I said, I'm gonna say this right now. Like, Mediator Kawerik is absolutely broken. He is at the moment the best cleanser in the game. We're talking about pure cleansing ability. We're not talking about cleansing with healing and stuff like that. But arguably speaking, he even beats healers in terms of cleansing ability. He just doesn't cycle as fast as, let's say, Akates, the fire soul weaver. So anyways, I really appreciate the comments there on the Ran video. I definitely think that Smallgate knows about this. It's just that right now they don't feel that it's at to that point where they have to do like this, I would call like a mental reset of resetting the player's expectation that if they're gonna nerf a hero, you can't expect some kind of compensation for it. They cornered themselves when they nerfed ML Araminta and Sage Baal and Cezanne back in the day. RB, well, they buffed RB and then nerfed him, and you could trade as well. So I think those three are the ones I can think of right now, in terms of ML5 being quote-unquote nerfed, and then we got compensated for it. That's a deeper topic in and of itself. Since this is a gacha game, people spend money on this, so I do understand it. But I actually asked one of my patrons, because he used to be a very heavy Summoner's War player, and I asked him, I'm like, is it as bad there? Like, do they? So it's basically like, if for a game like Summoner's War, what he tells me is, because I've never played that game, so I don't know, but what he tells me is that they don't balance heroes like this to be too crazy, but newly released heroes also aren't too crazy. They don't get like really insane like power creep kits, but heroes get balanced in terms of buffed and nerfed. So we're talking about real balance. That's what balancing really is talking about. It's up and down. And he was saying that, like, and I asked, like, does the community complain? He's like, no, they don't, right? I'm sure they would complain on individual nerfs and stuff like that, but it's like Epic 7 unfortunately has set this precedent for the majority of the player base. I'm not saying all of the players would complain about nerfs, but it's just everybody can see it from a certain point. It's just getting too much, right? Getting too much. Regardless, that rant aside and the continual rant aside, let's get into the kit itself. So Mediator Kawerik, again, right now he's going to be one of the most highly valued ML5s. In my opinion, he's definitely up there now. You do not need to test to know he's incredibly strong. First things first, Retribution. This is the after version. Dashes toward the enemy to attack, increases combat readiness as the caster by 10%, 15 max. So I'm assuming that has to do with the Mola. Any ally except the caster with the highest combat readiness up to 15 max. So again, like I said, additional like added to the tooltip, right? Bloated tooltip, bloated kits. This is how they're gonna buff that you can't really escape it, unless they do what they did with Yufine, which I'll talk about. That's actually comedy to me. So this is really good. All right, so on the S1 on a dual attack, I mean, I was thinking like you could build him on a Unity set for almost little what do you call it, a little disadvantage of where like maybe you would want to use him. I had a conversation with one of my guildmates. I was like, yeah, maybe on a Unity set, maybe he doesn't need immunity anymore. He's like, yeah, you might still need immunity for little things, and I agree. Like I always said that immunity is really good because you get that 15% resistance check. You always want that, right? Like for a lot of scenarios, you don't know what you're going into, so the immunity is like this extra safety measure. But it's very nice, right? Maybe you could have him on counter as well if he's quick enough, but he definitely needs to still be quick. But I don't think he needs to be that meme. I think he's very, very strong, robust base stats that you can run him on a speed set or any type of speedier set that you can, you know, put him in front as the attack buffer, immunity buffer, as the cleanser. He's gonna be very solid. But this additional to the S1 is already very good. One of my original complaints about Mediator Kawerik, if you watch my videos and you know my thought process, was that the S1, it didn't do much. It was combat readiness with the cast of the highest combat readiness, which is very like you don't know who's gonna be there, right? Like whether or not in the fight you got pushed back or someone got pushed back. It's good because everybody gets a turn, but sometimes it's not as good. It can actually break you, right? So certain turns that maybe you don't want, let's say a Soul Weaver to hit ML Ken before your DPS hits ML Ken or something like that, you know what I mean? So originally I was like, that's very RNG, very not that useful, but then now he has that increase for himself, which would be really useful as long as he has this for himself, which again, I mean, are we bored yet with S1 increasing combat readiness? It seems that if anything, everything has to either have defense break S1, strip S1, or a combat readiness S1. I mean, it's getting to the point where I think everybody's seeing the pattern now, but it's good, right? Combat readiness, you can't say it's bad. Balance of power after. So this skill also becomes a very, very useful one. It is a single attack skill, so attacks all the enemies. Attacks the enemy with the Mediator's power, dispelling all buffs. So when it says dispelling all buffs like this, it's one single resistance check. Sometimes you'll see skills saying that you know, dispels 2 buffs or something like that. That means that it's individual resistance checks. This one's like if it goes through, you dispel all of it in one go. That's incredible, right? So like we're talking about, like, let's say, you know, I've been using DN a lot in World Arena. Like DN, anti-crit, attack buff, you got defense buff, you got, like, you know, whatever, what have you. If it goes through, all of it's gone. Very, very good, very strong. This is a huge addition to his S2, makes his versatility even stronger than it was before. But then it still grants and of course it does this before the attack down, and then grants a barrier for all allies for 2 turns. Damage dealt proportional to the allies, and I say so it's the same thing here, but the damage and the barrier strength is also increased. So whatever that looks like, if I remember correctly, the barrier strength is already pretty decent. I mean, it's nowhere near like ML haste level, but I mean, from what I've seen, from what his barrier could do already, whatever increase he's getting here is just already too good. especially when the S2 is now really overloaded, in my opinion. Again, dispel all buffs. Yes, you got the 15% check, but if it goes through 85% of the time, you also decrease the attack for 2 turns, which is a separate rule. You also do need to bypass the resistance check there. But now with increased damage, increased barrier strength. So Mediator Kawerik ends up that he can actually be what he's supposed to be. HP scaling bruiser that can actually have crit damage without needing their resistance. So speed set, immunity set would be very, very like solid on him. You know, nothing would be wrong with that. You can go crazy meme as well. This is something that I mentioned before. I mentioned on my Twitch streams a lot, but I will, like, you know, I do mention it in passing in videos as well, is that bruisers, this is the confusing part about bruisers, right? It's just that they have so many stats, they don't require like that high speed, so they have a lot of variety they can place in their stats. They can have ER, that which will throw you off, like ER A Ravi, ER Fire Ravi. Like it's very rare now, but we've seen that before, and you can get taken away. It's like, whoa, what the heck? I can't dispel them, right? So he being naturally with Fire Ken's base stats means that he has that flexibility. He has that. The base attack is not super great, but he has the like really high base HP. He has the decent speed. He has an okay amount of defense as well, and then he has self imprint with effect resist. For those who had triple S'd him, you already have the benefit of 27% effect resistance for himself, so you can still build him at maybe 100% effect resist without immunity or something like that. There's just a lot of flexibility with him right now, but with increased damage, increased barrier strength, and he gets attack buff, self attack buff too. He's just gonna be one, hard to kill, very, very effective for the entire team, and apparently he has an attack release imprint, which I forgot about. One of my guildmates mentioned that as well, so thank you to him. So very, very solid all around. He's a very, very strong support right now, and again, just better than Kitty Clarissa. He doesn't need Strat Gauntlet, not really. So you can put him on a DPS artifact. You can put him on a lot of stuff now. He's just a really open book flexibility type of hero. And again, that has to do with a newly loaded kit, which gives him that flexibility and high base stats. The Nature Restoration Awaken, we should look at the after version. So restores balance that has been destroyed, dispelling all debuffs from all allies. So that's already really strong, right? So in terms of cleansing ability, this was old, but like that's better than Amelia, right? Like Amelia cleanses 2, but he cleanses all. So, and then grants immunity, and then grants attack buff for 2 turns. Increased combat ranges by 50%. I did have to, you know, confirm with my guildmate as well. It's like, how many turns, the cooldown does he have? He's 4 turns, so that's very normal. I'm assuming that's 4 turns after the Mola. But 4 turns, but technically it's about 3.5 turns, because you have an increased combat range of 50%. You got any dual attack in there, and you got yourself up to a 15% combat readiness boost for yourself, so even less. So in terms of cleanse cycling, he becomes better than, like, let's say ML Lilibet, because ML Lilibet, the issue with ML Lilibet, let's say ML Lilibet into Angel of Light Angelica, is that by the time you cleanse the first one, Angel of Light Angelica already gets the S3 back before you're halfway to your Lilibet S3. So design a Lilibet, ML Lilibet S3, because if you're cleansing the entire team, ML Lilibet hits AoE, and that AoE is not going to kill the Angel of Light, and the Angel of Light will CR boost. Some people have her on Spirit's Breath. So by the time Lilibet can cleanse again, Angel of Light, unless you kill Angel of Light by then, Angel of Light Angelica already has the debuffs again, and Lilibet just doesn't work. But ML Kawerik, because of the CR boost, he has the, I wouldn't say he has the ability to, but again, once he can get this skill available at the start of the turn, he'll decrease debuff durations to the caster by 1 turn. So this makes him right off, like right now, in terms of a opening cleanser, he is the strongest opening cleanser. He requires no RNG, no RNG like Dilibet. So sometimes, you know, people still can't cleanse with Dilibet because there's not enough debuffs on the turn that she goes. So she CR boosts on the second turn, so she doesn't really quite get a turn and can't get the cleanse. But he doesn't need it, right? So unless people skill reset him, he'll be able to decrease the debuff duration by 1 turn. Which means, what does that mean? It means Angel of Light Angelica, F10E, and the heroes that usually have the most crippling debuffs usually are 1 turn. It won't affect him, right? So like Abyssal Crown on the first turn, it doesn't matter. As long as you don't reset him, as long as the skill is available at the start of the turn, decrease the debuff duration of the caster by 1 turn. So Angel of Light Angelica has 2 turn unbuffable, 1 turn silence. F10E has 2 turn unbuffable, 1 turn what's it called? Redirected provoke. So if you have Mediator Kawerik, he is the best cleanser at the moment. This period, bar none. And then of course setting up immunity so that Angel of Light can't push back. F10E can't Abyssal Crown anybody unless they strip again. So once you have Mediator Kawerik and let's say Green Violet, no one in their right mind will be drafting F10E against you, because no matter what, you're gonna lose. And he's not like Kitty Clarissa where he like cleanses, but then what, right? Like with Kitty Clarissa, the issue is that whatever damage dealer you have with Kitty Clarissa, it's got to be a very, very strong damage dealer. It's got to really benefit from the S1. He doesn't need that, right? He protects the entire team, and then he quickly gets a turn to be able to attack down the opponent, and you barrier your whole team. So again, very strong. I don't think I need to emphasize this. I think everybody knows this. Everybody saw this. I saw this and I couldn't even believe my eyes. And don't get me wrong. Like I'm trying to do this without a bias at all. This is a very, very good buff, right? This is a very good buff, but is it good for the game? That's a whole other question. But with just Mediator Kawerik, you basically got many heroes kind of, I want to say nerfed. And I think this is where Smilegate is also not willing to nerf. Like on paper, they're not willing to nerf because they think that this is working in terms of nerf. It is, but you just basically have to compensate with more skills, more mechanics on the next batch for the heroes that are pushed out. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm saying it's unsustainable. But regardless, very, very strong. I don't have him. I'm hoping that he'll stop by the coin shop soon, because right now, like I said, I think he's going to be one of the strongest or one of the best ML5s you can have, based on this entire skill description. The difference between the one I was saying that should he be on immunity and all that stuff. It's always good to get that resistance check, just double check, in case it's a 2-turn debuff, like a Falconer Cleary provoke. Was Lilius provoke 2 turns? I think it is. I think Lilius provoke is 2 turns. But because this is 1 turn duration, so I think immunity at the end of the day is still the best way to go. I was thinking that maybe you can just skip it like entirely. But if you can get like some splash of effect resistance in there, even 100, I think that could go a long way, especially if you have him at triple S. But I think there's gonna be a lot of people building him. He's definitely going to be used. Debuffers like Angel of Light. The issue with Angel of Light Angelica is that right now he's still the best like counter to her. No one else really holds the same amount of weight, whereas like F10 is easier to counter. You got Green Violet and you got him. I don't know, we've got a double pick against Angel of Light that's very successful. He will definitely be one of them, but just in case, if you still have struggles with Angel of Light Angelica and have Mediator Kawerik, I would still suggest banning her, but at least you don't have to deal with F10E in terms of like, you don't really have to worry about F10E as long as you have him. So very, very good buff. Edda, also very, very interesting, very good, surprising to me as well. I didn't think she was like completely garbage back when she was released, but I just didn't really have a use for her. I think on paper she again is very, very strong, but people are saying this already, that, you know, ice heroes in the meta right now that does AoE and actually has to attack very weak in the meta because you have to deal with Violet Rem double picks. So you probably don't need to, you probably won't see her too much. I mean, this is the issue with Ran at the moment. I was watching a ton of RTA streamers, you know, use Ran, and yeah, they'll struggle, of course, with the Violet and the Rems. But what if they take them first, right? So I've seen Ran being useful once they stole Violet and Rem. Maybe Edda will be the same case. But well, let's talk about not how the buffs for Edda, not how the buffs affect the meta or if it's effective in the meta, but rather just the buffs itself. I think the buffs are solid. I don't think anybody's blind to that. So S1, like I said, CR boost or decreased defense or dispel, right? Those are the top three, right? Top three things you want. 75% chance to decrease defense for 1 turn. It used to be unhealable. Of course, this is an upgrade. No questions asked. Attacks all enemies with an explosion of ice, dispelling two buffs rather than one, before decreasing combat range a random amount of 15 to 40%. Grants the skill nullifier. Grants caster with a skill nullifier. So almost like a Athletica type of buff. Similar, not exactly the same, but similar. Grants protects herself, and then but Soul Burn, which she's a mage, so she can like just do it herself. Grants an extra turn. So granting an extra turn, you could probably go to the S3 here. So she becomes a very strong on paper, very strong crowd control hero with a very strong S1. Absolute Zero is the S3. We'd look at the awakened version here. Releases energy to attack all enemies up to 85% max. Chance to stun for 1 turn. That's AoE. And increase combat range of the ally of all allies by 20%. This is number of critical hits made, which is okay, but this may have been less, let's say in Guild War, or if she turn cycled again and the opponents had a hero that's dead. Of course, this being straight up, it just nullifies the amount of enemies that, and also it was used to be on critical hits, and now you don't really need it to be on critical hits anymore. So she could be built for bulk now, like very bulky. And effect. You increase combat range by 20% when an ally uses a non-attack skill. This skill is available. Increase the combat range of the caster by 20%. Like what the frick, right? So think about it this way. Like, I don't know how this will work in my mind right now. I can't think of it like in terms of like the synergy, like the perfect comp. But I definitely can see that being like super useful, right? So like, let's say Amelia is quicker than her or something like that, and Amelia does some kind of like CR boost into some DPS, and then you're able to increase the combat readiness of Edda, and then Edda can do the S2 and then do the S3, assuming you got Soul Burn. So maybe some kind of like very synergized maybe Guild War offense, maybe heck even maybe a Guild War defense. I don't know. Like it's so many ideas that can really come from this when ally uses a non-attack skill and this skill is available. So it would be on turn 1, right? So yeah, it could be useful there. In World Arena, I think it's gonna be harder to set up unless you're not setting up for this highlighted part. But again, like I said, Rem and Violet is the thing, so that's kind of annoying to deal with. Offensive arena, maybe. You got Angel of Light. Well, okay, so the thing about this is that for, let's say, like a counter Angel of Light Angelica, she kind of can, because she can double turn with AoE. So you can dispel first, and then you can stun. I don't know. Well, and you can decrease the combat readiness. So there's use for sure. So on paper, like I said, I think for 5-star RGB, I think she's probably one of the recent, like recently buffed RGB heroes that I can think of that has a huge amount of buffs. Like the last round, I think Luna's buff was very strong, and then Violet before that. But Violet is broken without having to have so much in his kit. or so many changes. Aluna is very, very strong with just minor modifications as well. She feels like she has like just like a ton of stuff added, and on paper, like I said, I think like anybody can do the kind of like play in their head. It can work, but it's like, what are they playing them into? What are they playing Edda into? And that becomes the more difficult challenge. That's the same issue right now for people who are using Ran. Even though he's very, very cool, and on paper I think he has very solid kit, it's just like, does it really work right now? But I mean, look, let's not lose hope, right? In the case of like how they're already buffing heroes and what we see in Mediator Kawerik, it's honestly pull for heroes and ask questions later. That ends up being the thing, right? Is pull and ask questions later. Have fun when they get buffed. If they're not really good at from the get-go. Oh, sorry. It should be like this. Have fun when you just pull them and they turn out to be crap. You bench them, and then have fun with them again as if it's a new toy once they buff them. That's the kind of the routine. If we're playing Epic 7. Alright, so here's where it gets kind of like iffy. So Mediator Kawerik, Edda, seemingly really good buffs, right? So, and then Yufine, not quite sure about this one. Not sure if this was the buff that she needed. So hits the enemy with a finishing blow. Oh, look at the awaken. So only really one skill has changed, but this one skill has changed quite a bit. In terms of the overall usage of her. So she has innately she has a 4-turn cooldown, assuming that you already what do you call, molded her. So 4-turn cooldown minus 1 turn cooldown, that is a buff, so it's 3 turn. You can grant an extra turn, so it's technically 2 turn. So by the time like she has, arguably I think that's what they want to use her for, is that she has this like incredibly like a lot of nuking power. I think if you want to use her in PvP, she's got to have some bulk. She's got to be able to sustain it. She does quite a bit of damage, especially if they don't have a defense buff, but she has that additional damage dealt when they are buffed, and then she strips and stuns after. The effectiveness buff is kind of a weird one to me. This kind of feels like this kind of forced, like they want to see how people will want to use her, because her S2 has a one buff D spell, AOE, and she has, I think it's 85% chance to silence, but then granting attack buff and speed buff for herself. So the S2 is quite loaded. So the effectiveness buff makes me think that, okay, it's really for, you know, it's mainly for that S2. I do understand that if you do soul burn it, you grant that duration by 1 more turn, so it's a 3-turn effectiveness buff. So by the time she can S3 again, assuming you do soul burn, by the time she can S3 again, you will be able to basically have the effectiveness buff for the last S3. In that sense, the effectiveness buff becomes strong for second turn silence, or sorry, second turn stun, as she does it for the S3. But again, I'm not quite sure if that would be that useful. After the turns, her attack buff and speed down, I believe, would be gone if I'm doing. No, I think she will have the attack buff and the speed buff still, if you soul burn with the effectiveness buff. The issue is that, like, I don't think that there's anything in here that still signifies that she's ready to be used in PvP. So then the question is that, okay, so what is the effectiveness for? Is it for PvE? But in my recollection, I don't see her being used in anything that is PvE. Maybe a Banshee one-shot, but even then, you're not really waiting for the effectiveness buff. So that's a bit confusing for me. So the effectiveness buff also pushes the Yufine to having to maybe, like, perhaps be built with some effectiveness. And again, the whole thing is a bit confusing to me, because you got an 85% proc rate for the silence, and that's even if you strip. But let's say if you want to silence, like, people with higher ER, cleansers for example, then you're still not going to really be doing much, because you would have to at least, at the very minimum, at least have over 50% effectiveness built in her stats with this to be over 100. That's like very, very minimum. Like most, like heroes like, you know, Ice Crow, Amelia and stuff like that. You need to be built as like minimum of over 100 effect resist. So you would need a total of over 100 effect resist to be able to even make that worth it. At least that's what I think. But like so yeah, so at the end of the day, it's like then she's still asking for too much. She has access to EEs, but I don't think any of her EEs really help here with the full synergy of what she's got in this buff. So in my opinion, I don't think they hit the mark with Yufine. I almost feel like they shouldn't even have pushed this one out, because now it's just like it's kind of confusing. Yeah, I'm a bit confused on this one. I personally think that they didn't have to release this one. This one feels like a filler, where Edda and ML Kawerik is like absolutely great. Edda is good on paper, probably hard in practice. Yufine is kind of sketchy. Is it a buff? Yeah, I suppose so. But I mean, this is kind of like bloated tooltip. I also talked about that before when I talked about the bloated tooltips. It's like sometimes it's not just like you add a couple mechanics and then the hero just becomes good. Sometimes you have too much mechanics, but it's not well designed, and this one definitely has to be labeled under that, in my opinion. BBK, also very, very strong. I'm very looking forward to seeing BBK being used. I'm most likely going to build her because mine is like skill enhanced. So right now I think that I think people who had counters at BBK will benefit even more so now. But I think perhaps you can actually build her as a different type of BBK as well with her new skills. So let's go through it. So sequential cutter, after quickly strikes the enemy with a sword, recovering health proportional to damage dealt, increases the combat range of the caster by 15%, and when the enemy is defeated, increases the combat range of the caster by an additional 35%. So originally it was when the enemy is defeated by 50. So realistically, if you defeat them, it's the same. But without defeating them, you still have a 15% CR boost. So back to that, like at the said at the beginning, add a CR boost to anything, and it will work, especially the S1, right? It's getting too predictable. It's getting predictable at this point. Cursed Sword, after, as health decreases, attack, defense, speed increase, and at the start of the battle, grants immortality to cast for 1 turn. So this is very, very nice. So ideally you want her to be on immunity no matter what now. The immortality becomes even more useful with the immunity, because I believe that if this is granted for the cast in turn 1, then having her on immunity means that like F10 can't debuff her either. She would debuff the immortality, but then BBK would have the immunity. So perhaps a play there, but regardless, it doesn't matter. Like if you have the immunity there, you don't want to be silenced, you don't want to be stunned. You want to have the flexibility of either choosing S3 or choosing S1. So no matter what, this is very, very strong to have at the beginning of the turn. I think cleavers can use her. I think anti-cleavers can use her as well. She'll be a very, very strong anti-cleave hero. But I think cleavers will most likely be using her quite a bit. That immortality for 1 turn is just very nasty to deal with BBK potentially being very high damage, because the lower the health, the stronger she gets. And she's a Scorpio, right? I think she's a Scorpio. So very high base attack even for 4-star. So yeah, so very good buff. All right. Bladar Dragon Awakened. Let's look at this. So sacrifice 20% of the caster's health, increase attack for the caster for 2 turns. So self-attack buffer now. Very, very good for the S1, being able to siphon back the health. But it's just that, you know, you're not going to get the attack buff on the turn that you still have the immortality. So that's just something to keep in mind. But that's good. That means that it's not like, you know, insanely broken, but it's still very, very strong. So increasing that for 2 turns grants the caster an extra turn when an enemy is defeated. It's the same thing, but now in addition, this skill cannot trigger a counter attack, which will make her much more viable as an AoE or DPS cleaver, because again, Rem and Violet are 2 of the stronger anti-cleave heroes at the moment. We're talking about like traditional cleave. and so if she doesn't even trigger a counterattack, that sets up for really good or positive stuff happening after, right? Because she already has an attack buff without any repercussions whatsoever, right? And then, like I said, if you build her on immunity, I think the stack should work that way. The immortality from F10 at least, immortality will get stripped, immunity will stay, so she won't get the redirect or provoke. She won't get anything. So, pretty good overall. I definitely think, like I said, I think she could be still usable as a counter. In fact, I think she's gonna be even stronger as a counter BBK. So that might be something I'll look into. Now, because with the combat readiness boost, without defeating the enemy, being able to get MLDB maybe before she can even get the S3, so she has an attack buff up and then she S3s, extends the attack buff, but she gets attack buff S3. Perhaps her health is already low, so I think there's a lot of play. And like I said, maybe a speed set type with high damage is still not out of the question, especially with that first turn of immortality. It's gonna be very good to have. Zale Carmainrose. So I had to kind of look into her again, because when she was released, because the Earth thing, I was thinking like it's a PvE hero, but then, you know, I saw one of my friends, Tatsuni, use her in one of my RTA tournaments back then. I don't think she's built anymore for him, but so I had to really look into this, right? Like, because clearly they're not really. I don't know if their intention is that they don't want her to be a PvE hero anymore, because they removed all the stuff that requires the Earth, right? So that's kind of like what Fire Haste got. So it really pushed him to like, oh, he's a golem farmer now, or he's just a farmer. This might not be the case, but at the same time, while I was reading her skills, I don't know if there's anything in here that I would be like, oh no, she's must build for PvP. So then at the end of the day, it ends up being like a buff without a purpose. At least that's what I feel like. Anyways, if you guys have an idea of maybe I'm not seeing something that maybe she'll be really good in for PvP, you know, leave it in the comments down below. I'd love to read it, because I you know, scratch my head. And the same thing with Yufine as well. It's like scratching my head, I was like, not sure what the intention is, right? So I mean they say this here is like more effective in different game modes, the condition to rune effect. So yeah, I mean that's like kind of like, yes, we see it, but then is it better for more game modes, right? That's the question I had. So after using vampirism, which is the S1, as a 100% increase chance to increase the combat range to the cast by 5%. Okay, cool. Okay, 5% combat range. Okay, another one, by the way. All right. So that is the S1 skill. This is the rune change of it. So yes, combat range is more combat range. Disease rune, 60% chance to inflict unhealable for 1 turn when attacking a target with vampirism. So S1 again. And then the wedge rune, when the caster's health is 50 or more, when using Spiteful Annihilation, has 100% chance to increase effectiveness to cast for 2 turns before the skill effect. So Spiteful Annihilation is the S3. It is a single target skill. It strips before you debuff. Hold on. Let me just. I mean I don't use Carmainrose, but let me just pull up her skills here. Because like was the debuffs are really good here. It dispels all buffs and it makes them unbuffable for 2 turns. Okay, that's it. And then she self buffs defense and attack buff. So Spiteful Annihilation, so you get a 50% effectiveness, which means that again the same issue with the Yufine effectiveness buff. It's like you'll want some innate effectiveness in her kit for sure. She does have like 18% effectiveness innate. Based on her skills, but like you still want a bit more, right? If that's what you're going for, but it's unbuffable, so I don't know. It's still, yeah, not super crazy for me in terms of the buff for this one. When buffs are successfully dispelled by Spiteful Annihilation, increase the combat range of the caster and the ally except the caster with the highest attack by 20%. So originally it was just the ally, now it was the caster. You have to successfully dispel, but the way it's written for Spiteful Annihilation is that it dispels all buffs. So like what I was talking about with Mediator Kawerik, is that it's not separate rolls. So like if it goes through, if the resistance check goes through, it strips all. Instead of like saying like dispels 2 buffs, dispels 3 buffs or something like that, where they're separate checks. This is all. But once you successfully do it, which you have a higher chance because you get an effectiveness buff, then you increase the combat readiness. Again, like I said, if you have an idea of like, ooh, her buffs are big enough that I can use her in, you know, this thing, let me know what that thing is, because I'm very interested to see, because I can't figure it out. Black Hand of the Goddess getting a second rework here. Of course it's going to be a bit better. You're decreasing the effect by 1.2 times every turn, and then down to 18%. So 18% critical hit rate, 18% critical hit damage. That's minimum, and so it's pretty strong. And people already adapted to use it before on specific select heroes, whether they needed to chase more speed or more, let's say, damage, and then reduce the crit rate. Whatever the reason is, if you have this artifact, I guess it's just better now. So and like I said, with book not always going to be used anymore because of Bellion's existence, this could again be a very, very strong artifact, 5-star artifact. And then Shepherds of Chaos, this one's kind of surprising to me. Increase the defense by an additional 10%, as health decrease, evasion and defense increase up to 40%. So maximum of a 50% defense buff. I mean, could this be BBK's thing? I don't think so. I prefer like MLDB probably still, because BBK is like, you know, the lower the health she has, the higher her defense, but she's a thief and a 4-star thief to boot, so she has very, very low base defense. Actually, if she's a Scorpio thief, which I think she is, I recollect the catalyst in my head. If she is a Scorpio, her defense is very, very low. So when we're talking about an increase of a 10% defense here, it's artifact stacks usually do occur after total stats most of the time. I think that's almost all of the time actually. So in terms of like, this is not 10% of her base. Like I think it's like 400 something. Let's say it's like 450. Okay, so it's not gonna be 45 defense. It's gonna be what her total defense is plus this. I'm not just talking about BBK, but this is a thief exclusive artifact, so most thieves are pretty squishy. It would have to be total defense. That's what I'm assuming. So 10% on, you know, let's say you get your I don't know who would use this, but let's just say you have 1,000 defense, right? You're looking at 100 defense. So 100 defense coming from artifact, okay, that's not too bad actually. If you think about it that way, it's not too bad. That's roughly like 20-25% in terms of a stat roll in terms of defense if it was in gear. But I do believe it works this way, that the artifact stacks, the stats are usually multiplied after, just like Hellcutter, stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's it for this balance patch. I mean, yeah, I spent a lot of time talking, I know, but I mean, there's only really one thing that's catching my eye, and that's Mediator Kawerik. So for those who have him, you're very, very lucky. That if you didn't pity him and you got him early, I mean, you should rejoice right now. I mean, this is why the balance patches are always very exciting, because people get like, yeah, which bench hero can I actually use? Mediator Kawerik will be meta. I can see him just being chosen even without people drafting debuffs. He's just gonna be a very, very solid attack buffer option now. So right now, Amelia, Maid Chloe, DN, and Mediator Kawerik, I believe that these 4 are going to be the most picked attack buffers for the majority of the ML Charles. I wouldn't say ML Charles is as meta as will ML Kawerik will be. ML Kawerik definitely there. Anyways, that's it for this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Let me know what you guys think about the buffs in general, how they're buffing, or even just the individual character buffs. And yeah, I'm just gonna end this here. If you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.